Today we will begin to look at the four turning of thought, the so-called four turnings of thought. Usually these four turnings of thought are, one will find them in the preliminary manuals. For example, probably the most famous that we are aware of is Paturum, which is a word of my perfect teacher, and so on. And also in the many of the Kajupas, Chakchen Monroe, the Mahamudra preliminaries. In Sakyapa, these four are taught either within the context of parting from four attachments or within the context of so-called triple vision. And in Gelug tradition, these four turning of thoughts are embedded in the initial stages of path to enlightenment, the stages of path to enlightenment. So therefore, these four turning of thoughts are very, very important series of contemplation that we have to do. And historically speaking, it seems that the first person, at least that I am aware of, who developed this in a very systematic way and in the order that we have, seems to be Longshenpa in some of his writings. Of course, it could be possible that there are earlier masters who wrote this, but up to the best of my knowledge, I think that Longshenpa is the first one to promulgate this four turning of thought in the order and in the series of contemplation that we have here. The first one is to reflect on the advantages and freedoms of our lives. Of course, in the traditional setting or from the traditional perspective, these advantages are presented as the 10 advantages, and then the freedoms are presented as the 8 different types of freedoms, free from a condition or circumstances where one does not have the merit to practice Dharma. So this is how the tradition itself present, and maybe to essentialize, I think the advantages and freedom that our life, especially those of us who have some sort of a connection have with Dharma, is to reflect on our own kind of circumstances, especially falling in kind of a love with the spiritual path that cherishes loving kindness and compassion, that cherishes the meditation practices, and that is basically very, very optimistic about the human conditions, about the condition in samsara. And also to emphasize Buddha Dharma is probably the path that lays kind of a fundamental importance and that emphasizes the centrality of the compassion in all of its spectrum of the Buddhist path. For example, one of the greatest master of Indian Buddhism is Acharya Chandakirti, and at the beginning of his famous work, he begins by paying his respect to compassion, because he thinks that it is precisely because of compassion, it is precisely on account of the centrality that compassion is given, that, for example, Buddha is there, that Buddha teaches and turns the wheel of Dharma on account of compassion. So we should really appreciate and feel rejoice in our merit of coming into contact with the path, with the spiritual path, with the Dharma. And then also, if we see someone else who is also connected with the Dharma in the way we are connected, then we should rejoice in his or her merit, and we should make aspiration that we will not waste our connection, our relationship with Dharma, and also we should make aspiration so that other sentient beings could also eventually come into connection with Dharma, and that they will also enjoy the warmth of the Dharma, the love of the Dharma. Likewise, we have the advantages and freedom in our life, because not only in getting connected with a particular lineage or the Dharma, we also have been able to get into connect kind of a relation, a kind of a spiritual relation with a particular teacher, a virtuous friend, Kalyana Mitra, who embodies the value of insight, empathy that is taught in the Buddha Dharma. Therefore, we will see that Buddha Dharma is not just an intellectual deliberations, that it is that there are still people who live and who embodies the principle of Dharma. So we should also appreciate that our merit, our freedom, and our advantage in having come into connection and getting connected with those great enlightened beings. This is very important, because if we reflect within the wider or within the small space of our own world, there are many people who have probably never heard even of a word like compassion and kindness, and who are always, or does not even have a split of a second of freedom, always busy trying to make their ends meet, or trying to busy fighting, as my Rinpoche wrote in one of his works, saying that there are people in this world currently fighting a war, carrying a, what is this, Russian gun, no? Taller and heavier than that they are. So we should really reflect on our own status, our own freedom, and our own merit in having come into contact with the Dharma, and not only coming into contact with the Dharma and teacher, but we really feel inspired by the teaching of Dharma, by the message of Dharma, and aspire to practice as much as possible. So we should really rejoice, and also in a way commit ourselves not to waste our life, not to waste our freedom and the advantages that we enjoy. So this is the first among the so-called four turning of thoughts. The second is impermanence of our life. In Buddhism, we could really distinguish two senses of impermanence. There's a gross impermanence, which is a pervasive change. The world we live in, it changes. For example, the seasons, it changes. The political system, the economy, media, everything seems to be changing. Our relations, our feeling, for example, our feeling when we wake up, and in the evening when we go back to bed, it changes. Our perceptions, our values, those things changes. And these are gross impermanence, gross changes. But there are, in Buddhism, the second sense of the impermanence is a subtle, like a momentary changes. The gross change could be only explained if we are able to see the grosser changes as a result of a moment-to-moment changes, momentariness. So this is the second kind of a second sense of the word impermanence used in Buddhism. But within the context of four turning of thought, the impermanence is mainly related, although not limited to it, with our death. This is not to be morbid about the death. As we all know, death is certain, despite current technological advancement and sophisticated knowledge of bioscience. I think at least most of us gathered today will die in next, 70 to 80 years at most. I mean, as at the farthest. And then also, when we look at our life, the conditions that will lead to our death is far exceeds than the conditions that is conducive to the sustenance and the survival. Likewise, so for us, I think most of us, the death is very certain. But one thing that is uncertain is the circumstances of our death. We don't know when we will die. We will never be able to kind of precisely ascertain the time when we will die. We will also not be able to ascertain the place where we will die. We don't know whether we will die in our bed, or in hospital, or in a empty flat, or maybe in the air. Likewise, we don't know the circumstances, how we will die. Maybe we will die of natural old age, or maybe because of unseen accident, or maybe because of a slow disease that will snatch away our life from us. And at the moment of death, it is our practice, it is our dharma practice, it's the cultivation of qualities that is taught in dharma that will really determine the quality of our death and the quality of moments after the death. So the way we live our life really determines the way we will die, and even more important, the way we will be after our death. So this is the second kind of a reflection. There is again, if you look into the Monroe manuals, the preliminary manuals, one will find lots of contemplative methods with regards to the impermanence of our life. So but the essence is to use about the certainty of the death and uncertainty of circumstances of death as an impetus, as a kind of inspiration that will push us in a way to engage in the Dharma practice, and that we will not waste our time, so to speak. Not wasting our time by engaging in some of the distractions that we usually are immersed in. So this is the second turning of thought. The third turning of thought is the suffering and limiting nature of samsara. If you look at the samsara, for example, samsara could be one's own psychophysical constituents. We can see its fragility. Samsara could be our possession, our wealth, which are also fragile, which are also something that we cannot really trust, our status, our fame, which are also something that we really cannot trust. And samsara is permeated by uncertainty, suffering on different levels. We could look at our own current world, whether the samsara really is good or not. How many people are suffering in the world currently? Of course, obviously on account of the current pandemic, but also due to famine. For example, in country like Yemen, many people are suffering from famine, the never-ending war in the Middle East, mostly fought due to people's pride and vanity. And then also most of us, even though we don't have obviously kind of a fully blown suffering like famine or war, we have our own limitation, our native bigotry, our prejudices, our biases, and these things limits us. These are the samsara, and they limit us. And then the perpetual need for entertainment, for satisfaction, and the kind of people's following their greed in the name of ambition and so on. So when we really look at samsara, our life from different perspective, we will see it is limiting, and it is kind of permeated by suffering at different levels. So that samsara is something that we should be really careful, and we should try to develop a renunciation with regards to the samsaric phenomena. And then the last in this series, in this turning of thought, is the principle of causality, the law of karma. The law of karma is really one could really think of law of karma as in terms of two or three related notions or idea. Karma, on the one hand, is a law, as a law of causality, to explain the relationship between the volitional actions as executed either through physical body or verbal speech or mental activities, or it is, so this is the relation. The law of karma is the relation, it is the law or principle used to explain the relationship between the volitional action on the one hand and their kind of a corresponding results on the other hand. And then for example, again, to use the example of those preliminary manuals, we will find that the law of karma is mainly used as an ethical teaching for us, what to adopt, what to reject, and how to live our life according to a principle that appreciates the loving kindness and compassion on the one hand, and that is also reflecting the principle of interdependent origination. So these are some of the basic understanding of karma. So in summary, when we reflect and when we try to think of these four turning of wheel of dharma, what they are trying to do is, these are the series of contemplation that is aimed and directed at generating a sense of dissatisfaction, a sense of renunciation with regards to the samsaric world, with regards to the samsaric experiences, as rooted in the karma and eventually rooted in the ignorance about the nature of phenomena and nature of one's own personal identity or personality.